Reimagining Success, episode 400. This episode clearly is a bit of a milestone and a bit of a reckoning as well. A look back at what nearly 8 years of doing this has taught me, and some important thinking about whether I should keep doing it the same way. I've also got some news about what happens next, so stick with me. Welcome to Reimagining Success, the podcast that helps you build a profitable business as an independent expert, one that works for you and your lifestyle. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg, former corporate insider turned business mentor, executive coach, and mum of two. Whether you're a solopreneur, a coach, speaker, consultant, I'm here to guide you in creating a business that gives you freedom, flexibility, and the fulfillment you're looking for. Ready to redefine success and build a business that you love? Let's get started. Oh my goodness, 400 episodes. I started this podcast back in December 2018. The first proper episode was called What Does Being Successful Mean? Which tells you something, because I think that's really still the question I've been trying to answer. Now, first, if you can indulge me, a little description, I guess, of what was going on at the time. So I left my job in 2013. So this was actually already quite a few years into working for myself, quite a few years into my coaching. And in 2018, the beginning of the year, I had 3 projects I wanted to do. I wanted to write a book, publish a book, in fact. I wanted to launch my first group coaching program, and I wanted to launch this podcast. And if you have been a long listener, you'll have heard me share this story before, because it's an important one, I think, that I like to share with clients too. But at the time, trying to do these 3 things at the same time was not possible. And so I sequenced them, and I ended up launching my first group program because that was the commercial priority in February 2018. That was the then business incubator. I then had a bit of a few months of working and decided to publish my first book, Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5, in October. So that was on my birthday. And then the final few days, I believe, of the year, I managed to push out the podcast, December 2018. Now, for those of you who've had a podcast or who have considered launching a podcast, you'll know that there are so many fears and tech questions that get in the way of you starting a podcast. Oh my goodness, how will I edit it? What music will I use? What will I talk about? How does it even work? How do I record? Do I need a studio, etc.? At the time, I guess I was a little bit ahead of the trend. That was, after all, almost 8 years ago. It's not like today when a lot of people have podcasts. To be honest, I will take a moment to celebrate, because whether that means something or not, given so many podcasts have disappeared or only launch a few episodes and then give up, I am actually in the top 3%, apparently, which says something, if nothing else, about my persistence. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But all this to say that it was a great achievement for me, and I'm so proud of myself for doing it. Now, early on, the episodes, and please don't go back and listen to them, were basically me reading blog posts. So that is not a great approach, but hey, I did what I had to do. I launched with my first 3 episodes, as I believe the recommendation was. And then over time, the podcast became actually the core of my content. So I did rather the opposite. These days, the transcript sort of acts like a post, and really the podcast episode is the core of my content for that week. And it has been a weekly podcast, I think, pretty much without fail, even with a couple of bonus episodes since December 2018. But anyway, so I started with those first really big open questions. What is success? Why are so many of us chasing a version of it that doesn't actually make us happy? And then pretty quickly, the show got more practical. So if you go back to 29, I go all in on quit your corporate job and design your corporate escape outside the 9 to 5, because that's where I was. And, I'd left my own corporate career a few years before, and the show was basically me working out loud how you build something else and supporting people to do that. So my group program was exactly that, helping people leave the 9 to 5. My book that came out, I think it's now December 2022, possibly. I should check that, was outside the 9 to 5. And I am working on my 3rd book, which is exciting, which is part of the reason for this whole rethink, but that's by the by. So that's where I was at the time. And then it did broaden. So I had the 5 pillars that I talk about in Outside the 9 to 5 that ultimately the business incubator organized around, and that's really been the core of a lot of my content over the years, was the 5 pillars of designing success, cultivating confidence and resilience, choosing the right business model, building an effective personal brand, and designing flexible work-life integration. And those have been the red threads throughout these years. And it's what I've been coaching people on, mentoring people, one-to-one, group workshops, etc. And for a while also there was a little bit around maternity and working with a baby, because I had my daughter in May 2019, so that was the first experience, and then I had my son in November 2020. What strikes me, I guess, now looking back, is that I've come almost full circle, actually. So the episodes I've started making this year, the minimum viable week, the 4-hour workday, why women are leaving corporate, they're certainly more specific than the early ones, but they're still asking the same question that I started with. What does success actually look like? And who decided that for you? And does it still make sense? I think I just understand the question a lot better now than I did at episode 1. Now, the thing that most people say to me when I say, oh, I'm coming up to 400 episodes, is some version of, oh my gosh, I don't know how you've kept it going. You're so amazing. You're so consistent. What incredible discipline. I wish I was like you. Yeah, along those lines anyway. 400 episodes, nearly 8 years, mostly on my own, with a monthly interview with someone every single week. The practical implications of it have become easier now with AI, with transcripts. I'm pretty sure I actually transcribed the episodes myself in the early days, so that'll tell you how foolish I was at the time, or at least how far technology has come. And I take that as a compliment. It's definitely great, and I hear you. I'm on, what am I now? I don't know, year 3 of my Duolingo streak, and I know that's very impressive. But I want to talk about the shadow side of this, because I've started talking about success scripts for a living, and these are the beliefs that we run without realizing. And discipline, I'm realizing now, is one of mine. The same thing that gets me to 400 episodes. Just keep going. Don't miss a week. Show up no matter what. Don't give up, is also the thing that stops you ever asking whether you should still be doing it this way at all. You can keep going for so long that you forget to check whether it's still the right thing. And I've always found that tension really difficult. And I've discussed this with clients too. When do you know that, yes, I should just keep showing up and eventually it'll work? And when do you go, no, actually, I should pivot, I should tweak, I should scrap it, and that's really difficult. I know Seth Godin has written a book called The Dip, around that sort of when you know if it's just a dip or a blip, or if it's actually, a failure, or if it's not working, and so on. And I suppose I should be properly transparent here, in case you thought that this was a top 10 business podcast. It is not. And I'm sorry to shock you. The numbers aren't massive. So yes, top 3%. As I said, I think that's largely due to so many failed podcasts out there. And ironically, of course, given today's episode and what I'll be sharing in a minute, the downloads, the listens are actually the highest they've ever been right now, which is great. However, I am not sitting on an enormous audience. I haven't been, nationally recognized. In fact, one of the podcasts I listened to, the High Performance podcast, recently celebrated 400, and it was incredible what they've achieved. My goodness, it's become their full-time business, hired, 40 people, I'm making it up. And obviously obviously you might not know that, but lots of incredible celebrity names. And that's just not my approach at all. And it certainly hasn't been my trajectory. So I think it's really important to recognize now what it is, and I don't want to undersell it. And hopefully you agree as a listener. This podcast is something my clients really value, and that's been super useful. I've been able to send people episodes, both people who are already working with me and people who perhaps aren't ready to work with me. I've been able to send them this as a free resource, specific episodes. For a while, I even had a little GPT that helped you find the right episodes. I've since moved away from Claude, and I'm sure things will change again in the future. But that was an interesting piece to help people sort of curate the playlist rather than just have that massive library and help you find it randomly. Sometimes it's definitely brought the right people to me, although I've often told me that actually the more effective strategy is to go on other people's podcasts, to get onto other people's platforms, rather than having your own podcasts. And again, if you're listening to this, which you are, by definition, you're hearing what I'm saying, I am so grateful that it's something you've chosen to spend your time on, and I certainly don't take that lightly. However, it matters to some people, a small core group of people, and I have got results from it, and I have enjoyed doing it, and it hasn't been a burden in any way. All those things can be true, but at the same time, I should therefore keep making it exactly like this forever is a different thing. And if I'm honest, I guess I've been treating them as the same thing. Now, bigger macro picture here, I guess, is that there's a bigger shift going on in podcasting as well. It's all video now. Everyone's starting now. It's all YouTube first, big productions, cameras everywhere. Obviously, we've got the Stephen Bartlett Diary of CEO. There's Chris Williamson, Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, Adam Grant. It's all the social media clips as well. And I could chase that. But the truth for me is that the format works. I did toy with a video format for a while. And first of all, it's incredibly boring for you just to watch me talking to the camera, as engaging as I am. And I do video in the interviews, but again, it's quite a simple Zoom format. It's certainly not got the high production value or costs. But the format works for me because I can literally just turn on the audio, record today, just one episode, but often, 4 or 5 episodes in one go, send them to my editor, and that works really well. I also have the sense that it works for you as a listener, as a busy business owner, founder, solopreneur, often parent, whatever, who doesn't have time to sit and watch, a 3-hour streaming on Netflix or whatever, unless it's a really great show. I don't mean that, but what I'm saying is a podcast, we want a short solo episode, 10, 15 minutes, works for me. I record it in a slot, and I think it works for you too. So what I'm sitting with, I guess, isn't how do I make this bigger? How do I make it more like everyone else's and sort of follow that trend? It's rather, what is the version of this that's actually worth your 15 minutes and mine? Which brings me to some news, which is, drumroll please, as my son would say, I won't see you next week. I'm not going to be back next week. I'm pausing the show at least over the summer. So I mean properly pausing to actually think, not just take a break and pick up where I left off in September. If it comes back the way it's been, it'll be because I've decided what it's for now, not because it's the thing I do every week. It might mean a sharper focus. It might mean shorter series, one theme at a time. I always actually recommend to people, if they do start a podcast, just do a series of like 10 episodes, and that could be enough. Or at least it gives you permission then to take a break and then do another series. Whereas the weekly format that I've gone with has carried with it this sort of discipline, consistency, endlessness that has become perhaps a bit heavy. Now, the podcast might look entirely different. I just don't know yet. And I'm not going to pretend I do. To be honest, it's a little bit meta, but this whole show is about not running on autopilot towards someone else's idea of success. And ironically, a podcast can absolutely become that if you let it. So I'm taking my own advice for this one, which is where you come in. Before I make any of those decisions, I really, really, really want to hear from you, the people who actually listen, and in fact, some who don't. So I will be emailing my list and people who don't listen to the podcast. But I would be so, so grateful if you could answer a few short questions in my survey. I'll already pop the URL in my mouth, as it were. Now, onestepoutside.com/survey. Very simple. onestepoutside.com/survey. A few minutes, honestly, it might feel, a detail, but I'm just trying to squeeze the insights out from you, and hopefully to really, really help you, as well as me, to understand what the show has been for you, perhaps why you've listened to it, why you haven't listened to it, what you'd want from it next, and whether you even want it in its current form. And if you all go, oh my gosh, don't stop, Anna, then that's obviously a signal. And if nobody even bothers to fill out the survey, that is also a signal, and I shall take it on the chin and move on with my life. So again, onestepoutside.com/survey. Put in the show notes, obviously. And as a thank you, hopefully you'll do it anyway because you have strong opinions and you want me to help you. But everyone who fills it in who wants to will go into a draw for a one-to-one call with me, which is worth a lot of money these days. So it's well worth your time. But hopefully the survey itself is enough of a motivator to fill it in. So the call is just a bonus for helping me think this through. So with that, I'm going to say, final emotional note, I'm quite sad about this. Whether or not I come back, you just don't know. It's one of those things I might say I'll be back and then years later nothing's happened. But I actually feel a relief and an excitement, as I often tell clients. And if you'll indulge me as I share one more insight from this, I suppose, you have to say no to something, even if it's okay, even if it's good, even if you're kind of competent at it, in order to make space for the big yes, the exciting, scary, game-changing thing that is fully aligned, that makes you scared and excited at the same time. And this podcast was that when I started. Maybe it's no longer that. I love saying I'm the host of the Reimagining Success podcast. I should, and I'm so sorry I haven't mentioned this, thank everyone who's been a guest on this show, because it's been the best part of it, really. Obviously, it can be quite lonely as a solopreneur, certainly quite lonely speaking out into the ether on the podcast. And because I do audio and I record it in my own room here. And so one of my favorite things, and in fact, why the podcast probably started in the first place, was that I wanted to speak to other people. That's where the first book came in, Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5. I was interviewing people for my own inspiration, very selfishly. And then ultimately that came onto the podcast. And I've spoken to founders, super successful, living their best lives, facing super hard challenges, life, health, personal, professional, but ultimately, like me, sharing this view that we can and should, if I can use that word, define success on our own terms and build a business and live a life accordingly. Final thank you, and he used to sometimes listen to my episodes, but he probably won't now, but I will say thank you to Elvis over in Sri Lanka, who has been a legend editing this podcast. I'm sure he'll be very relieved that he'll get a bit of a break at least, but I may still be back, so hold that thought, Elvis. But thank you for your incredible support editing the podcast. There are some episodes when I was editing them myself, you may have noticed, but don't tell anyone. I'm not a professional, but I got by anyway because that's what we do, isn't it? So thank you to Elvis. Thank you to my interviewees. Thank you to you, my clients, my listeners, my lurkers, to all of you. Right, let's go and find out what the next one's going to be. I might see you later, or I might not. Bye for now. So that, my friends, is 400 episodes. Now, before I decide what's next for Reimagining Success, I do want to hear from you, what the show's meant to you, what you want from it next. It just takes a couple of minutes. I read every response myself, and everyone who completes it will go into a draw for a one-to-one call with me. So hopefully that makes it worth your while. You can find the survey at onestepoutside.com/survey. That's onestepoutside.com/survey. Wishing you a wonderful summer.